Z, on today's show, we're talking about bringing the soul to quality control.
You love to rhyme, don't you? It's so fun.
I do like to rhyme all the time. And we're talking about Lean Six Sigma, how to become a black belt master of non-disaster.
Let's do it. I'm ready. Are you ready?
With an American treasure by the name of Don Meador. And I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. You're ready. Andrew, are you ready?
I'm so ready.
We're all ready. And now, without any further ado, let's get this shindig started.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from
Yes,
the bottom, and
yes,
we'll eradicate
yes,
it. Started
and
from the
yes.
bottom, now
Ladies
we
and
here.
gentlemen, on today's show,
Started from the bottom,
we
now
are
we here.
interviewing another The Donald. Donald, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Happy to be here.
Hey, you know, a lot of our listeners go on Spotify and they look at the titles of the show and they have little debates about, is it Meador? Is it Meador? Clarify how you want your last name to be pronounced for our listeners out there.
It is Meador. I think it's easiest to think Meador is better.
Meador is better, and Meador also rhymes with cheddar. This just in. Now, Donald, you have survived mergers, promotions, reorganizations, downsizing, countless changes in corporate America. Could you share with us, I mean, you're a guy who's led multi-million-dollar projects and was selected actually to complete a 2-year program to become a Lean Six Sigma certified black belt. Could you explain to us, what is a Lean Six Sigma black belt?
Well, the title is a lot cooler than it actually is in reality. But basically what it is, and for most people familiar with, GE and Jack Welch and the Lean Six Sigma approach, really originated in manufacturing. But then all the great business minds decided we can apply this to every single thing in the world. And so what they did is any process that exists in any organization, you look at it with a fine-toothed comb. You look at every single step in every process you have, whether it's software development, whether it's real estate leasing, and you look at time, you throw some statistics at it, and you try to see, is there any way we can shorten this process? What are the metrics we need to be measuring to actually gauge our success? And so what we did is we spent 2 years basically not only learning the methodology, but actually applying that onto projects. And to actually become certified, you have to successfully complete and show success in 2 projects before you can officially, quote unquote, graduate.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tee up real scenarios that our listeners would run into on a daily basis, but I'm going to use my businesses so you can pick on them, and then we're going to get into your new book. So one of my businesses is called Elephant in the Room, and we cut hair for men. All right, so it's kind of like a country club for men's hair, if you can picture it. And it's very high end, and the average haircut has to be cut within 27 minutes. And currently, with the 4,000 members, we make a mistake 3% of the time.
Okay.
Now, the other business, I don't own it anymore, was a bakery, a beautiful bakery. We won a lot of awards. It was the #1 bakery in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we made wedding cakes. And so I want to tee up each one of these as kind of a Lean Six Sigma battlefield. So let's say you went into a haircut, facility where you have 4,000 members, and we're open from 11 to 6 every day. You got to get all 4,000 guys in. We have 6 days a week. And the average haircut has to be 27 minutes. And that we're making a mistake 3% of the time. How on a practical level would you go in and help maybe somebody's business make that more efficient?
Absolutely. Well, the biggest question is, what are you actually trying to optimize? That's the real question, and one that is fraught with complications, because whatever you measure is what you improve. And there's a whole lot of moral hazards if you choose to measure the wrong metric, right? So what if you decide, I think haircuts should be done in 25 minutes? What's that going to do at a human level, right? You're going to rush. You're going to try to get faster. You're trying to get more customers in the door. Yes, your revenue will go up,
Right.
but also that mistake percentage will go down. Right. So you can't hold everything perfectly still. The same token, if you want to decrease your error rate, what you're going to have to do is, what if it's now 27 and a half minutes? Well, your error rate went down, but your revenue also went down. And so that's why it's so important on the onset to really sit and think through this and say, okay, what is the metric we're actually trying to influence?
So let's say in this case, because we're open 53 hours a week and we can do 2 haircuts an hour, and we're open for 4.3 weeks a month. We got about 455 hours, to get in all 4,000 haircuts. So we got to do about, 11, 12 haircuts a month. And we really, with the 3 locations, I'm very confident that we don't want to ever have more than that number of members for the quality. We want to keep that experience tight. Let's say
Absolutely.
that you're dealing with the bathroom not being cleaned regularly. We have an interval kind of alarm system there. Every half hour we clean the bathrooms essentially. But let's say you go into a small business and the bathroom's perpetually dirty. They have a hair salon. It's beautiful, but the bathroom is always dirty. The towels can't be folded on time, and everything's always behind. The average small business owner is always behind. They're always a little bit under budget. They're always on the verge of not being able to make payroll. They're always a little behind on the taxes. Help somebody use Lean Six Sigma to become more proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only way to do that is, and one of the things that Lean Six Sigma might not potentially be quite as good at, is the human element. Right. So the challenge is that the reason those tasks are behind is because they're not incentivized. Right. So there's not really that big of a reason to go clean the bathroom. Right. Because you don't get paid for that. Right. You're going to get paid for serving customers or haircuts or whatever it is you're doing in a bakery. And so there's no proper incentive to actually keep the bathroom clean. So the only way to do that is to change the way the process is actually done from an incentive perspective so that employees actually want to keep that. And now there's lots of ways to keep that bathroom clean. There's lots of ways to do that. You can go into it, whether it's part of the pay structure, it's part of whatever, but that's really more of the challenge in those type of scenarios is not necessarily a process problem. It's a people problem because there's really no purpose to that. Like, what really happens if I don't clean the bathroom? Yeah, my boss is mad, but I kind of got more haircuts or I got paid the same. And so that's one of the challenges is the processes don't necessarily technically have to be done to get their job done. And so that's where you run afoul of some of these kind of side tasks. I think about it, when I used to wait tables, they wanted you to, roll so much silverware and do all these things. You didn't make any money doing that. Right? That's not really part of your day-to-day job and part of your income. And so that's the biggest thing is making sure as part of their daily process, they have to be incentivized to do that and understand that part of their pay is commensurate with that.
Okay, so let's talk about Jack Welch for a second. You referenced Jack Welch, arguably the number one CEO of all time, who grew GE by 4,000% during his tenure at GE.
He did okay.
He talks about the kick and the hug as it relates to incentivizing. Do you believe in the kick and the hug? Do you believe in exclusively the ninja kick? Do you believe in the black belt kick? Do you believe in the black belt hug? Tell us about what your thoughts are on the incentivizing with the kick and the hug.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you do have to use that for the challenges, and to be really a great leader in a business is you have to individualize. Right? That's the most important thing. You have to understand whether the kick or the hug is actually what's going to make them do their job, because it's not the same for everybody. I've managed some pretty huge teams, and certain individuals, they needed a kick almost every day. True. And they weren't going to do their job without it. Right? But there's other people that if you did that, they're just going to up and quit. Right? They're not going to respond to that. And so that's why you as a leader, man, you've got to sit down and you've got to talk to these people. You have to understand why they're at work every day. You have to understand what actually intrinsically motivates them, and do they need the kick or the hug? They both work, but they don't work on the same people.
Can you share about how many people you've managed at one time, or how large of an organization you've led at one time, just to give our listeners who are not as familiar with your background?
I think at one time the most people I had directly in my command was 19 direct reports.
Got it.
And then I also had 2 offshore divisions as well at the same time. And so when you look at that, it's probably upwards of 30 people, and they were all mostly remote. They were in 6 different time zones all across the country. So about as spread out as you possibly can go, all across the world, really, because India and California and just all over the place.
Now, for the listeners out there who aren't aware of this, Lee Cockrell, who's been on the show multiple times, who once managed Walt Disney World resorts and 40,000 employees, 40,000. He said you should really, if you have more than 12 direct reports, you're kind of a ninja. I mean, that's a tough thing to do. So managing 19 direct reports can be a quite challenging. Now, your new book is called Surrounded by Insanity, How to Execute Bad Decisions? There's a question there.
That's it.
Tell us about your new book, Surrounded by Insanity, how to manage or how to execute bad decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. And that really gets to what I like to call corporate reality. Because the truth is, if you're on a large team and you're not the guy, if you're not the CEO of your company, more often than not, you may be executing somebody else's idea. You're executing someone else's decision, and it gets handed to you to go lead a team or to even do yourself. And there's so many times that you don't even agree with the direction. You don't agree with the decision, and much more so, you might actually think it's going to fail. What do you do about that? Nobody trains you for that. How are you going to go talk people into do something that you don't even yourself believe in? And so that's really what it's about, is how to survive in that type of culture. And how do you do that, right? Understanding how, the results aren't what makes you successful. It's the perception of your results is where you actually get success, and understanding how to build that and understand what it's going to take to survive when, maybe you don't quite agree with everything that's going on.
And for anybody out there who hasn't been married before, Mr. Kanye West recently explained during an interview that he said, you've heard about dog years. He talks about how, a dog, one year for a dog is like 7 human years as it relates to their life expectancy. And he said 1 year of marriage is like 100 years, And so Kanye said he's been married for 500 years. I think a lot of times the challenge with marriage or a business marriage or a partnership is it's impossible for everybody to agree on everything all the time. So we're working forward right now. We're moving forward with the premise that maybe your boss is asking you to do something that's not unethical maybe or illegal, but you just don't necessarily agree with it. So chapter 1 of your book is called You've Already Lost. What is this chapter all about?
Absolutely. It almost follows the stages of grief. But basically what I have seen over and over again is when you hear these terrible ideas or you're asked to implement them, the first thing you want to do is scream. You want to fight. You look around, you're like, does no one else realize this is a terrible idea? And so you fight back. You say, oh, we can't do that. We need to do it this way. We need to do it this way. But here's the truth. The decision's already made. It's over. It's gone. It's done. By the time it gets to you, there's no changing anyone's mind. And so that's the first thing you have to do, is just accept the fact that, okay, this is the direction we're taking. Now what? And most people can't do that. They continue to fight it. They do all these rebuttals. They try to change people's minds. But here's the truth. You cannot change people's mind once it's already made up. That is a psychological, scientific fact. And we have to understand that.
There's a movie, Mr. Deeds, that was starring Adam Sandler, perhaps one of the deepest American philosophers of our generation, Adam Sandler. And in the movie, he ends up becoming the head of a company. His grandfather, I believe, dies. And so now he's in charge of a major corporation. The problem is he has the mind of a third grader. And I'm going to cue up just a brief little audio from the movie so you guys could get an example of what it's like to work for somebody who maybe doesn't have it all figured out here. Let me cue up the audio here. This is the scene where Mr. Deeds is explaining to his butler that his foot is black because he had bad frostbite, and he's instructing one of his employees to hit his foot.
Yeah, I didn't feel that. What else you got? Hey, get that fireplace poker right there and just whack my foot.
Do I absolutely have to?
It's gonna be fun. Just grab it. All my friends do this.
So he's instructing one of his employees to take out a fire poker and hit his foot with it.
Come on. Go ahead, give it a whack. Nothing.
Really?
Isn't that sick? Didn't feel that. Isn't that awesome? Go ahead. Nothing. Yeah, I know you're starting to like it, aren't you?
Chop that wood.
Yeah, that's it.
Ow! You're sick!
You're sick. Why would you do that to me? I'm just kidding you, pal.
And that's the kind of stuff. Sometimes at work, right? Your boss is just
Absolutely.
doing dumb stuff. Your boss wants to take you to lunch. Your boss wants you to go to some corporate event. Your boss wants you to go talk to some account that you don't need to talk to. Your boss, I know a lot of bosses are obsessed with corporate travel. I'm sure you've seen this before. Where the boss loves to send you on a plane somewhere. They just love to get you on a plane.
Yeah,
Talk to me
it's
about
great when you have multiple bosses, right? And one boss says, man, we've got to travel a bunch. And then a new boss comes in 3 months later and says, whoa, why'd you travel so much? I don't know about these expenses.
Right. I just know I used to have, I won't mention the name of the company, but I had a major consulting gig with a huge Fortune 500 company, and they felt like boots on the ground was the key to success. So they would fly me into Denver, fly me into California, fly me into Florida, fly me into they'd fly me in, and I would get there, and I wasn't needed for the meeting. They never really asked me anything. And then we would have like a lunch, they would send me off, and I'm like, what was that? So talk to me about this. Chapter 7 of your book is called What If You Are Wrong? What is this chapter all about?
Well, I spend most of the book talking about how to handle when you're surrounded by craziness and everyone else is nuts. However, I think it is important to take a step back and realize you might actually be the one that's wrong. What happens if you're the guy that thought everything was a bad idea or even came up with a bad idea and everyone's looking at you? What are you going to do then? Right. And so that's the biggest thing is understanding how to communicate the fact that you're the guy that's screwed up instead of everybody else.
That could be. Talk to me about how you gain that self-awareness. I mean, you worked in corporate America for a long time. How do you go about gaining that self-awareness that maybe you're wrong?
Well, I think the biggest thing is lines of communication, right? You can't do this in this bubble, right? You should be constantly talking to your peers, talking to your team, talking to your boss. You have to be reading the wind, is what they say, and understand and looking at the metrics and looking at things, and you start to see things turn. You're like, wait a minute, if I'm the only guy in this company full of smart people that I know that thinks this is a bad idea, it might actually be me. I might be the common denominator. And so when you do that, that's when you got to start to say, what have I done to back myself into this corner if I fought against this? That's when you've really got to start over communicating with people, telegraphing what's going on with your projects and everything, and talking with your peers to say, okay, do I need to be doing any sort of damage control? Was I the guy that was wrong?
I find a lot of times, I run, businesses or, just hundreds of people communicating with each other. And I find one of the biggest challenges is that, and I'm a podcast host, I communicate, for a living here. I found that a lot of times if you do the right thing, if you make the right call, but you don't over communicate what you're going to do first, it could offend a lot of people. They're like, oh my God.
Oh, absolutely.
I was blindsided by the fact that you canceled the water subscription service that delivered the water to our building at 3 times the cost of the current company that we'd switched to. I cannot believe I was blindsided. Why wasn't I told that we moved the lunch meeting back from, 11:30 to noon or that kind of thing? And so talk to me about the importance of over communicating within corporate America.
Oh my goodness. I can't even tell you the number of times as a young leader I screwed this up. Basically constantly, because nobody trains you how to do this, right? They don't tell you. I think when I got promoted to a manager the first time, I may have had like a 2-hour course, and they're like, here you go, kid, take it away. And there's so many times I said the wrong thing because words really, really matter. Really matter. How you say things is important. And I actually do talk about that a little bit in my book on how to frame these things. And so the way you talk inclusively about your team and talk about, hey, we're in this together and all these things that it may sound a little wishy-washy, man, I tell you what, it matters a lot to a lot of people. And that's the biggest thing is you should be, I'm one of those guys that really do I'm candid all the time, maybe too much. I mean, because I think that's the right way. We treat people like adults. And so you should be over communicating the heck out of stuff. Your team, your bosses, whoever should never be surprised about anything. And that includes canceling a lunch meeting, things like that. And so when you're intentional about your communication, and that's a big word, intentional about how you communicate and actually providing that, people may be sick of it, but as you've pointed out, the alternative the alternative is so many people get their feelings hurt and just this craziness because you thought it was no big deal. It might be a big deal to someone. So you've got to make sure you're very explicit in the actions you're taking, why you're doing them, and why it has to be done. Now,
you come across as a very proactive guy, a guy who is very intentional about how you design and organize your day. How do you organize the first 4 hours of your day, and what time do you typically wake up?
I'm very much in the Gary Keller model of the one thing, right? Very much that book was pretty impactful on me to understand what is the most important thing I need to do today. And so that's what I try to do the day before, right? So, today we're looking at, when we're recording this, I'm going to write down what I need to do tomorrow that I think is the most impactful thing. I'm going to have that written down. So when I wake up at about 6 a.m., I look at that first and I understand, okay, all else fails, this is what has to be done. And then I usually have a couple subtasks, but I make sure I'm focused on that more than anything. And I think it's so much of a progress over perfection type of mindset is you're never going to complete your entire to-do list ever. It's just not going to happen. But if you make sure you have it prioritized correctly, you make sure you have that one thing identified, you can go to sleep knowing you had a good day.
Also, I find when you have your one thing written down on your list and then you have kind of like the second thing you want to get done if the one thing is done, it allows you to really, if somebody misses a meeting or can't be there, you know what I mean? There's those weird moments where your plane gets delayed or you have a 30-minute window of time. You can go look at your list and go, oh, yeah, that's the one thing I need to knock out. And it allows you to not waste those little pockets of time, those gaps in your schedule, which I believe as a leader of something, you usually find yourself with about an hour or two a day where something cancels, something weird happens, something moves around, and all of a sudden you've got that little 30-minute burst of downtime. And if you don't know your one thing and you don't have it with you, then you can't work on it.
Absolutely. And I also think, and I take time for this every day, to also realize probably the stuff I'm working on in the grand scheme of things isn't really that important. If I'm being honest, a lot of the stuff we're so stressed about, we're so worried about, and in 5 years' time, it's not going to matter. And I've seen this in the corporate world. You think about it, what you're working on. Oh, this project, it's so important. I've got to get these tasks done. And you're so stressed out and you're pulling your hair out. And the truth is, in 5 years, no one is going to even remember what you were working on that day and the tasks you completed. What they will remember, however, is if they liked working with you, if they want to work with you again. Did they enjoy you being around? Did you do a good job? Those are what actually people remember, not the actual ABC tasks that you're doing.
Now, Don, I want to go back to Lean Six Sigma real quick because I don't have a lot of guests that are willing to talk with me about this kind of nerdery, which I love, by the way. I love this. I have found that people a lot of times hate checklists. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I hate checklists. Yeah. I mean, I hate scripts, and I hate recipes, and I hate blueprints. I want to build a building and see what happens. I want to make a recipe and see what happens. I want to follow a script sometimes. Talk to me about why people hate proven processes.
Absolutely. And I'll admit, even though I'm a process guy, there's plenty of times in my life that I hate processes and I want to do things my way. And it goes back to the whole autonomy thing. A lot of us think we're smarter than everybody else, I think is a big part of it. They don't like being told what to do. I don't know a single person that likes being told what to do. Nobody. And I think that's the biggest challenge when you look for these optimizations. You come in, and when I was doing this work day to day, I would come into an organization, nobody would even know me. I'm just some outsider who shows up and starts telling these guys how to do their job better, and they may have done it for 20 years. That's pretty annoying, right? So it's this annoying person coming in, giving them a checklist on how to do their job better. And so that's what really bothers people is I think that not only there's the resistance to change, but you know what, I don't need someone telling me how to do my job. I know what I'm doing. I'm confident. I feel good about it. So what you have to do, and this goes back to the communication angle, is you have to speak to them individually. The number one emotion people have, the most important thing they have in the world, self-preservation. That's it, period. All comes down to it. That's what they care about more than anything in the world. And so you have to speak to that on an individual level. You have to tie that process improvement to say, hey, this is why we're doing this, and this is how it helps you personally. That's what we have to focus on. I know when I was coming in, automating a lot of the engineers' work, there was a lot of pushback because these are smart guys. They don't want people to automate it. But when you put it in a frame of, hey, the reason I'm doing this is I want to take these easy tasks off your plate so you can focus on the really hard stuff, the stuff that you're going to be great at. And that's what's so important, is to really focus in on the individual level and say, this is why this will make you personally better.
You know, Atul Gawande, who is a professor at Harvard University, wrote a book called Checklist Manifesto. And in that book, he says good checklists, on the other hand, are precise. They are efficient, to the point, and easy to use even in the most difficult situations. They do not try to spell out everything. A checklist cannot fly a plane. Instead, they provide reminders of only the most critical and important steps, the ones that even the most highly skilled professionals using them could miss. Good checklists are, above all, practical. Talk to me about making a checklist or a process. Leave the listeners with say they want to make a process for how to make a part, or for how to make a wedding photography workflow. Do you recommend getting out a whiteboard and kind of sketching out the process from left to right? Do you recommend what do you recommend?
Absolutely. So that's how I do it. But the most important thing that Lean Six Sigma teaches you is to talk with the people that actually do the work. And that is missed so often, especially in large corporations, where a VP or somebody else thinks they know what needs to happen. They think this is how you sketch the process. When I actually have meetings with those folks, they're not even in the room. I try to get anyone that's not an actual frontline employee, not even in the room. I don't want managers in there. I don't want any leader whatsoever, because they tend to overtalk. You actually want the people that do the work, that know the work every single day. That's who sketches out the process, not you. It's going to be the person that's actually already doing it. Then you look at because they're the real experts. You look at that in the room and say, okay, how can we guide this? I don't know if you've been bowling recently, right? I know I go with my kids, but when you're bowling, right, you can actually have them put bumpers up, right, on the side, so you can't get a gutter ball. No matter what you do, they put those bumpers up on the side, right, just to help guide the ball. That's what a good process is. That's it. So there's still autonomy there, right? You can still bounce around. You can put on the left side, on the right side, doesn't matter. Your goal is to make sure they hit the pins every single time. And that's what a process is to still have a little bit of flexibility and autonomy in there, but make sure you're guiding everyone to the right principle. And you do that by talking to the people that actually do the work and listening to them and taking their input, and get up at that whiteboard and do the process 1 to 2 to 3.
Now, I'm not sure, Andrew. I'm not sure, Andrew, if you could clarify here. Is this sound clip right here? Is this audio of our guest here? Bowling of our guest here, the master black belt. Is this audio of Donald Meador bowling, or is this from the movie Kingpin? Can you clarify?
I think this is it. I think this is audio.
This is audio of Donald. I'm sorry, Donald. I'm sorry. I should have asked before miking you. This is Donald Meador, allegedly. This is Donald Meador bowling with as only a Six Sigma black belt can do, a Lean Six Sigma black belt. Let me cue it up here and just see. We'll play about 30 seconds, and we can see if it is Donald Meador or if it is from the movie Kingpin. Let's see here.
Consecutive strikes to win it all.
3 consecutive strikes to win it all.
I need you now more than ever I need you.
Sounds like Donald Meador. Here we go. Got the back brace. Good form. Looks good. Oh, strike.
Great job.
Oh, well, I think that's
what I do.
Was that you?
Strike.
Was that you, Donald? Or was that you?
It's what I do.
That's what he does.
I can't. It's definitely me, because that's how I roll.
I'll tell you this, the process of the Lean Six Sigma is where you remove errors and waste while reducing variation, a.k.a. gutter balls. So it has to be Donald Meador. Donald Meador, congratulations on your great bowling performance. And I have a final question here for you. For the listeners out there that want to take some action, where can they get a hold of your new book, or do you want them to go to your website? What's the best way for our listeners to devour more than just this half hour of content?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find my book on Amazon. It's called Surrounded by Insanity: How to Execute Bad Decisions. And you can find out more information about me and just some of the things I'm doing at thecorporatemiddle.com.
Thecorporatemiddle.com. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a bowling expert. He knows the Lean Six Sigma black belt game. That's Donald Meador. Thank you, sir, for being on the show.
Absolutely. A lot of fun.
Hey, you take care. And now, without any further ado,